most people can't. So, you know, I think...
It's very clean.
Yeah, it's going to get better. We spent the last 3 months not iterating on the product, but actually beta testing and focus group testing different interfaces. We're about to come out with a much better interface that is much actually simpler and easier to understand. And we think
and more
that
natural, right?
Absolutely.
It's about it's like what you intuit. It's like watching my 2-year-old daughter Misha pick up the iPad and away she goes, and you're like, "Fuck, that's the shit." Right?
I'll give you a great.
Like it's intuitive. It's intuitive.
So you know, Apple nailed it, right? Think about what Apple did. Apple got, you know, the trend in phones 5 years ago was miniaturization. Remember, we were going to wear it in our ears and on our lapels and our watches, and then all of a sudden we were carrying those flip phones. Everybody was, right? Those little screens. And then all of a sudden they're getting smaller and cheaper, right? Then Steve Jobs comes along and does something that no one else in the history of the tech industry has ever done. He said, not only are you're gonna start carrying something that's twice as big, it's gonna be 4 or 5 times more expensive, but it's gonna be so much better that you're gonna forget about all those things and just do it.
And now every Android phone looks like it.
Yeah, but take an Android phone. I carry both. I carry an Android because we developed for that, and I carry an iPhone. Hand them to my 2.5-year-old son, takes the Android and tosses it over his shoulder, couldn't be bothered with it, picks up the iPhone and slides the screens, finds all the baby apps, opens them up, plays the games. I mean,
so the big takeaway is everybody needs a 2-year-old in their lives.
It's amazing.
I think the other thing that's interesting about mobile, and sort of what you touched on, is that it's also a new experience, right? Like everybody loves their device, they have this addiction, they keep it close, but so many new apps and services and things that are coming out, you know, you have to explain to people, you have to convince people that it's something valuable that they would use again and again. And so that's where I think a lot of innovation is happening, is not in the things we can look back and kind of see how people have used, but to look at this technology and say, what can we do now? What are new experiences we can introduce?
Anything from you guys over there? I just want to make sure.
Yeah,
you guys are a little
quiet by default.
Yeah.
Sure, I got a question for Michael. What have you noticed in kind of the different approaches coming from advertising and B2B and going towards consumer? Like that just seems like a huge fundamental shift from an area you do so well.
It's a lot harder. But I spent most of my career on the consumer side. So I went consumer, B2B, and then back to consumer. And look, with B2B, you can use your ears to listen to your customer. You can use your personal power, charm, and personal powers of persuasion. You can use your charm and your persuasion to get a customer to do something you want to do. And if you serve that customer well, you got a reference, and that reference will help you get more customers. So that's why I personally think B2B, if you have a talented person and a good idea, applying it to a B2B side of the ledger, I think is in some ways easier. Business to consumer is more difficult for the reasons I just described. You have to be, I'm part psychologist, part sociologist. I have to understand colors and why is that button orange? It should be blue, and I cajole my team into moving things around on the screen. Then we hand it to people, thinking for sure they're going to get it right off the bat, and they have no clue what the hell we're trying to do. It's humbling and bewildering, and I think. But the stakes are so high that if you get it right, and the reason why there is a bit of a bubble in the tech industry right now, a little bit of a bubble, is the ones that start to get things right, prices are going up really fast. Why? Because Tumblr could end up being a multi-billion-dollar company out of nowhere, right? I mean, and so everybody wants to know, like, how do I manipulate that interface and that color scheme and those features and functionality so that I can become the next multi-billion-dollar company? So the stakes are really high.
It's really interesting that you talk about the bubble, because there seems to be these layers of bubbles. So you get the bubble rising up, and then underneath there's this another little bubble coming up. I have 4 kids that are 11, 12, 13, and 14, and that's another. Man,
you were busy.
I was. You got to be good at something.
For one period, only for one period of time.
I'm a professional baby maker. But
is that right? 11, 12, 13, and 14?
Yeah,
that's incredible.
So I got on my phone 2 years ago, and they start getting apps. And so I sit in the chair, and they're bringing me the phone deck, and I get this app deck, and So I had this constant, research of these kids, and if you don't know anything about apps, because I had another company who built, iPhone apps and all this stuff, is that, like you're saying, everybody browses on the App Store for the apps. Hardly anybody buys apps through iTunes. But watching them use their phones and watching them interact with, they text me in the house.
Yeah.
So, and also, they don't call their friends until after they've texted them.
That's
Texted
right.
back and forth a couple times. Can I call you? It's rude to call someone without texting them first.
Yep.
So I'm not convinced that we know yet what that demographic is going to be using, whether it's 2 years or 4 years. So the challenge for a guy like Tumblr is that, or even Facebook for that matter, I don't know where they go from 50 billion. The challenge is the value proposition for the enterprise value is such a spike that if they don't bounce out at that top tier, then it's possible that they never come out of that downward slope. And so the challenge for there is, what do you create that's sustainable versus simply just leveraging a high multiple
Currency.
and bouncing?
The answer to your question is currency.
What type of currency? Is it the relationship currency? Is it
No.
brand
Dollars.
currency?
No.
Money.
Facebook credits.
Facebook credits.
So what you're talking about is correct, and Facebook is, we'll see, but early on, I've been impressed with them understanding all those things, unlike so many people before them, right?
Are they talking about American Airlines points? So I'm addicted
No, I'm
to
talking about
American
Facebook
Airlines?
credits. So I'm talking about, will you do something on Facebook or somewhere else that will earn you actual Facebook credits that are actually redeemed for actual money, right? So
What about just
people-
money?
It is money.
No, but what about just money?
Why? When you can control the money. Fuck money if I can be money.
True enough.
So, so that's the answer, right? So when you could be the credit card, you know how much money Amex makes? You know what kind of percentage they make on the merchant? 5, 4 point something. You know what Facebook's gonna make? 30. So, your answer is credits. What their real big battle is, why, so Zynga announced this morning they're gonna go IPO.
Right.
Facebook makes 30% of every dollar Zynga makes, for
But
the most
Zynga
part.
makes more money than Facebook does.
No, if you really, no way, it's so funny to think about the tortoise and the hare, right? Sure, if Facebook wants to turn that on, it's not even close. It's not even close. Now, Zynga's being smart, they're trying to diversify HTML5 and in-browser games, and there's a lot of things going on that could change the course of that conversation. But I think where Facebook's got a really what will be interesting to see if they can pull off, and where their energy definitely is social inducement, back to what this lovely lady was talking about with some of her stuff. What happens when Aquafina pays you 15 cents to watch their video?
I think it cheapens it.
Sure it does,
Yeah.
but for a little while it will happen.
Sure.
And so, what happens is, and I've made this mistake a lot, I think too far ahead. And I think what you're doing is you're thinking pretty far ahead, and I think you're right. I know, however, there's a whole lot of stuff that happens in between, right? There's a whole lot of stuff that happens in between. And the ability to really get crazy is to be successful in the reality while hedging the future. And I think that's kind of the interesting stuff that these kind of companies need to battle with. Back to Tumblr, first they got to figure out how they are going to be a revenue model, right?
Right.
I mean, all these companies have to do. And I think Apple has done a lot of good for all of us in tech. When Apple came out and created the infrastructure of paying for apps, we went back into a world of pay. We were in a 3 to 4 year window there where it was all free.
Did I mention that we give our users a blue Calypso Visa debit card, and based on their activity, they get cash every month? for
Yeah,
what
and
they
I
do?
think his point is right. Like, people will then start wondering if they're talking about these products just to make cash and there's some cheapening. But if you guys are able to understand how to hedge that and make sure that they don't all become sellouts and lose their social equity,
Right.
which is what you bought in the first place,
Exactly.
you are a real company. If you can't, then you're not.
Right.
So how does gamification for business affect? Because everyone's addicted, everyone's playing. Anyone done Empire App Day or some of these?
I'm about to launch, I think, the first version of that ever in a few weeks. We're about
And
to.
it teaches you new things. You're like, holy crap, business playing. I haven't touched Angry Birds in weeks.
I think you definitely are. I mean, the gamification of our society is coming. Here's one of my big things. Here's the number one thing I'm thinking about, is I truly believe that the state of Texas will give you a tax break in 3 to 5 years if you check in and do something within the state that they view as valuable. That if you,
They've got a fund set up. The governor has a fund for that organization.
awesome. I didn't have to wait long for it to be confirmed.
Well,
I mean,
I think what you're referring to is the emerging technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
that's
what I'm
something
referring to is if
completely
Texas
different.
decides that
Yeah.
people need to go to Austin and see this museum, or go, to Houston to see this well, or they've figured out that there's a benefit for you to fish in this pond,
Yes,
that if we start doing those things and are able to prove them with our mobile devices that we've all kind of are all shaking our heads and understand that they can track and understand and check in and things of that nature, that's gonna start getting really interesting. I mean,
Stay
we're
off
gonna
the tollway for
Yeah.
this time,
Yeah.
stay off the tollway
3
from
cents off.
the efficiency that we will be able to create
Yeah.
with this kind of stuff and the data and is just extraordinary. We're not thinking
Dennis
about those
Crowley,
kind of
right,
It's
things.
a
right.
miniature version
Yeah,
of
Dennis and I talk about
the subsidies for people that produce television and movie shows in the state of Texas or in other states.
Absolutely.
Just taking it to a consumer level and giving you
On a
an
one-to-one level.
incentive. Yeah, and saying if you vacation here versus somewhere else, these are the benefits.
It's like the
you're going
Visa
to get.
point. Everything, study the credit card industry and you can understand quite a bit of where things can go and will go and, absolutely. I mean, what were we gonna say?
No, I'm in, around June 15th, I'm launching a new version of Hashable that will essentially be the first mobile personal CRM system that blends sort of social interactions like Twitter, what you do on Twitter and LinkedIn and other places, with the concept of a Salesforce on the back end. So you can essentially save and collect everything that you do with people. That's where we sort of look at it as a path between LinkedIn and Salesforce.com, but without the typing. With Hashable, you can save a bunch of information without ever really typing anything. So what you're going to see is a game design that we've been working on for months now that will reward you for saving and collecting and then referring. So for instance, saving the fact that you just met a startup lawyer in Texas, collecting startup relationships with various startup lawyers in Texas, or graphic designers, or whatever your social circle is, your business circle, and then referring those people to other people upon request. We're gonna be sort of rewarding those sorts of actions. Hey, I need
shared
to.
data.
What's
So
that?
It's kind of like Zoom info or Jigsaw, where you
Jigsaw.
gather other people's credit or business cards and then it creates new points, except for it's actual money that's involved. Or because I
But-
wouldn't share my contacts too much.
Yeah,
You
no.
follow me around.
Yeah, so, but if I ask you, if I know you, you and I know each other, and I say to you, hey, I'd love to know, I'm gonna start a company, I need a startup lawyer. Do you have a referral that you can give me? You might introduce me to someone if we know each other.
Right.
That interaction is a very powerful interaction. So what we wanna do is reward not you for making that referral, but the person on the receiving end of the referral. And then everybody else in your network might see the fact that you referred this startup lawyer the most times, and this guy the second most times, this guy the third most times. It's very powerful.
So the reward is
That's a gamification of real business.
Except if you're the third most preferred guy, you're gonna be upset.
Maybe.
the reward
So
is
you
the
gotta do
top
better.
10 list. Is that what you're saying? Because I was going to ask you, what is the actual reward? Is it an icon? Is it a title? But you're saying it's a top 10 list.
Yeah, so we're creating like a labeling system essentially. So the most referred lawyer in New York, for instance, is a guy named Ed Zimmerman. Ed Zimmerman.
Big wine library customer, by the way.
Yeah, so as soon as I told him what I was going to do, he became a voracious user of Hashable, because he said, well, if you're going to start ranking people by the number of times they're referred, I want to be the most visible and the most referred lawyer in New York City. And as soon as that happened, the guys from Goodwin Proctor, which are his direct competitors, started playing, and the guys from the various other law firms. Why? Because
It's like
it's
SEO for-
it's tracking